My child showed up for Christmas without asking. So I told them they didn't belong here. Then I sent them to a hotel, canceled their rent and cards, and reminded them that my money means I control where they sleep. Now they're accusing me of abandoning them overnight. I didn't think I'd ever be typing something like this, but after the last few days, I genuinely feel like I'm living in a different reality than everyone else, and I need an outside perspective. Because from where I'm standing, I enforced boundaries that were long overdue. From where everyone else is standing, apparently I abandoned my own child overnight. I'm 55. I'm Jordan's mother. And before anyone jumps in with assumptions, let me be very clear about something up front. I have always provided, consistently, reliably, financially. I've never pretended to be the warm, fuzzy, indulgent parent. That was never my role. I was the provider, the structure, the reason things didn't fall apart. Jordan is 24. An adult. And yet for years now, our dynamic has revolved around them still being supported by me financially while insisting they are independent and grown. That contradiction has been the source of almost every conflict we've had since they moved out. I pay Jordan's rent, not partially, fully. I cover their credit cards, their phone, their health insurance. I've done this under one condition. There are rules, expectations, boundaries. I don't believe in funding someone's lifestyle without having a say in how that support is used. That's not cruelty, that's reality. If you're still being supported, you're not fully independent, and pretending otherwise doesn't change the math. Jordan likes to frame this as control. I frame it as accountability. They moved out a few years ago, but I would not describe that as launching. More like relocating with a safety net, still fully intact. I was fine with that at first. Everyone needs time. But what I wasn't fine with was the entitlement that came with it. The assumption that my home was still theirs whenever they felt like showing up. The assumption that my money meant unconditional access, not conditional support. That assumption is what blew everything up. Our relationship has been strained since Jordan became an adult. We argue constantly about independence, respect, gratitude. I'm told I'm cold. I tell them they're dramatic, emotional, manipulative when things don't go their way. I don't respond well to emotional pressure. Never have. I respond to logic, to structure, to agreements being honored. Jordan knows this, or should. Christmas has always been a complicated time. Boundaries matter more, not less, during holidays. This year, I made it very clear that I was not hosting. I did not invite Jordan. I did not discuss plans. There was no open-door assumption, or so I thought. A few days before Christmas, I get a text. Not a question, not a request, a statement. Hey, I'm in town. That was it. No asking if it was okay to come by. No acknowledgement that this is not their home anymore. Just an announcement like access was assumed, like nothing had changed. I was furious. Not explosively angry, but deeply, coldly angry. Because this is exactly the pattern I've been trying to break for years. The assumption that I will bend. That I will absorb discomfort so Jordan doesn't have to feel it. They showed up anyway. Standing on my doorstep with a bag, acting surprised when I didn't immediately step aside and welcome them in, as if the lack of invitation was irrelevant, as if my space didn't require permission. I told them plainly, this is not your home anymore. You can't just show up. You should have asked. Jordan looked genuinely shocked, like this had never even occurred to them as a possibility. That reaction alone told me everything I needed to know about how deeply ingrained this entitlement was. I didn't yell. I didn't insult them. I told them they were not staying here, that they needed to find other accommodations. I booked them a hotel for the night, one night. I paid for it. I made sure they had somewhere to go immediately. And yes, I told them they were not welcome under my roof. That sentence seems to be what everyone is fixating on, as if saying it magically erases the context, that they are an adult who showed up uninvited and expected access because of money and history. Jordan was upset, visibly. But I was calm. Calm because I finally did what I should have done a long time ago. I enforced a boundary without backing down. What I did not expect was what happened next. That same night, I canceled the ongoing financial support, rent payments, credit cards, discretionary expenses, not retroactively, not punitively, prospectively, going forward. I told Jordan exactly why. If I am paying, I decide the terms. If my money is supporting your life, then I have a say in how that support functions, including where you sleep. If that makes you uncomfortable, then you are free to refuse the money and fund your own independence. This wasn't retaliation, this was consistency. Jordan did not see it that way. Within hours, I was getting texts accusing me of abandonment. You left me homeless overnight. That was the phrase, homeless. As if I hadn't paid for a hotel. As if they didn't have options, friends, their father. As if this was some dramatic survival scenario instead of the consequences of showing up uninvited and refusing to respect boundaries. I scoffed at the language. I still do. Words matter, and that word is being used to emotionally bludgeon me. Hotels exist. Jordan is an adult. I did not dump a minor on the street. I did not strand someone without resources. I enforced a line. Then the call started. Extended family. Furious. Accusing me of cruelty, vindictiveness, abuse. People who have never paid Jordan's bills, never dealt with the constant emotional tug-of-war, suddenly had very strong opinions about how I should run my household and my finances. Jordan, apparently, had told their version of events, one that focused on being kicked out at night and cut off financially, with no mention of the years of support, the lack of permission, the repeated boundary issues. And here's the thing that really confuses me. Everyone is acting like enforcing boundaries is the same as abandonment, as if adulthood comes with all the benefits of independence, but none of the responsibilities. I didn't abandon my child. I stopped subsidizing behavior I no longer accept. Adults do not get free access to their parents' homes. Adults do not get unconditional financial support without expectations, and adults do not get to rewrite consequences as abuse just because they don't like them. Jordan is accusing me of abandoning them overnight. I say they are rewriting the story emotionally because accountability is uncomfortable. So I'm asking this genuinely because I don't understand how we got here. Why is enforcing boundaries suddenly considered cruelty? Why does financial support no longer come with authority? Why am I being painted as a monster for refusing to be manipulated by guilt and entitlement? And if my money doesn't come with authority, then why should I give it at all? Update 1. I didn't expect to be back this soon, and I definitely didn't expect the situation to escalate the way it did. I thought things would cool off after the initial shock wore off. I was wrong. Within a day of what happened, the backlash went from irritating to overwhelming. Extended family members who I haven't spoken to in months, some in years, started calling, texting, leaving voicemails, not asking what happened, not looking for clarification, condemning me outright. The words people are using are extreme, cruel, vindictive, financial abuse. That last one is being thrown around constantly, and I'll be honest, it stunned me. I've spent decades being told I'm reliable, responsible, the one who keeps things together. Suddenly, I'm being painted as some kind of monster because I enforced a boundary people don't like. What shocked me most wasn't just the criticism, it was how unanimous it felt. There was no quiet middle ground. No one saying, I don't agree, but I understand. It was pure outrage, like I'd crossed some invisible moral line everyone else understood, and I somehow missed. Then Paul got involved. My ex-husband called me furious. Not disappointed. Furious. He accused me of using money as punishment, and said I had finally gone too far. He said this wasn't new behavior, that I'd been using financial leverage on Jordan their entire life, just in subtler ways when they were younger. According to him, this Christmas incident wasn't an isolated event. It was just the first time I'd done it so blatantly that no one could excuse it. I dismissed that immediately. Paul has always been sentimental to the point of being impractical. He leads with guilt. He always has. He accused me during our marriage of being too rigid, too transactional. I told him then what I told him now. Structure isn't cruelty, and consequences aren't abuse. But even as I said it, I could hear how rehearsed it sounded, like I'd said these same sentences for years. Meanwhile, Jordan's version of events was spreading fast. I didn't hear it directly. They'd already blocked me. But it reached me through family, mutual acquaintances, even someone I run into occasionally at work. The story, as it's being told, focuses heavily on two things: that Jordan was sent away at night, and that all financial support was cut immediately. No one seems interested in the context, the lack of permission, the years of financial support, the repeated arguments about entitlement, the fact that Jordan is an adult who had options. All of that gets brushed aside in favor of the emotional core of the story. Parent sends child away at Christmas and cuts them off overnight. I kept insisting they were exaggerating. I still believe the word homeless is inflammatory and inaccurate, but what unsettled me was how easily people accepted Jordan's framing. People I thought knew me, people who have benefited from my help in the past. They didn't hesitate. They believed Jordan. That was the first time I felt something other than anger. It wasn't guilt yet. It was something closer to disorientation, like the ground I was standing on wasn't as solid as I thought. The confrontation with Paul didn't help. He told me Jordan was staying with friends for now, and possibly with him afterward. He made it very clear he wasn't going to pressure Jordan to reconcile with me, or encourage them to be grateful. He said something that stuck with me more than I expected. You keep calling this a boundary, but boundaries are about what you will do, not how you control someone else. I snapped back that cutting off financial support is about what I will do, that I'm allowed to stop paying, that no one is entitled to my money. He didn't argue that point. He just said, the issue isn't the money, it's that you used it to make a point when they were already vulnerable. I told him Jordan wasn't vulnerable. They're 24. He said, being an adult doesn't mean being invincible. That annoyed me more than it should have. Then my social circle started to shift. Subtly at first. Fewer replies, canceled plans, a holiday dinner invite that never materialized. One friend, someone I've known for over a decade, told me flat out she needed space because what I did made her uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. That word rattled around in my head for days because I've always been the one making other people uncomfortable when necessary, the one willing to say no, the one who didn't cave to emotional pressure. That was supposed to be a strength. Instead, I was suddenly isolated. Jordan went completely no contact, blocked me everywhere, no response to messages, no negotiation. And here's the part that surprised me most. They didn't ask for the money back. They didn't try to bargain. They didn't reach out through someone else to say, if you reinstate the rent, we can talk. Nothing. I expected panic. I expected pleading. I expected anger at least. What I got was silence. That silence triggered something I wasn't prepared for. Rage, yes, but also panic. Not because I missed Jordan emotionally, not yet, because my leverage was gone. The thing that had always anchored our relationship, however strained, was gone. They chose independence over conditional support without even trying to negotiate. That scared me more than I want to admit. In the quiet moments, I started replaying that night over and over. The door, the look on Jordan's face, not just upset, confused, like they truly hadn't imagined this outcome. I realized something uncomfortable. I never once asked if they were okay. Not emotionally, not beyond logistics. I made sure there was a hotel. I made sure transportation wasn't an issue. But I never checked in as a parent. I didn't say, "Are you safe?" I said, "This is how it is." At the time, that felt appropriate, necessary even. Now I'm not so sure. I keep telling myself this was about teaching independence, that boundaries matter, that one night shouldn't destroy a relationship unless it was already fragile. But I can't ignore the fact that the relationship did shatter. Completely. And I didn't expect that. I thought Jordan would be angry, then come back calmer, ready to renegotiate on my terms. I didn't expect to lose them entirely over what I still believe was a reasonable line to draw. I'm not apologizing yet. I'm not taking it all back. I still believe adults don't get unlimited access to their parents' homes and finances. I still believe money without boundaries breeds entitlement. But I can admit this much, even if it's uncomfortable to write. I thought boundaries would teach them independence. I didn't expect to lose my child over one night. I don't know what happens next. Right now, all I know is that the certainty I had when I wrote my first post is gone. Not replaced with remorse exactly, but shaken. And that's a feeling I'm not used to sitting with. Final update. I've waited longer than I planned to write this because, frankly, I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound either defensive or hollow. Every time I started typing, I caught myself trying to justify something again. Adjusting language, reframing intent, looking for a version of events where I was still right. That urge hasn't disappeared. If anything, it's still there, sitting under everything I'm about to say. But I can at least be honest about what's changed and what hasn't. The biggest shift, and the one I wasn't prepared for, is this. Jordan didn't come back when the money stopped. I expected it. I don't mean that arrogantly, I mean it practically. For years, when things got tense, we would clash emotionally and then resolve things financially. That was the pattern. Conflict followed by logistics, hurt feelings followed by payments, continuing as usual. I assumed this situation would follow the same trajectory: anger, silence, then eventually a text asking about rent or insurance or just checking in. It never happened. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. I checked my phone more often than I'd like to admit, Not in a desperate way, more like waiting for an overdue bill to arrive. Something inevitable, something transactional. I told myself Jordan was just trying to make a point, to prove independence temporarily before reality set in. Reality did set in, just not the way I expected. Jordan stayed independent. They didn't ask for reinstatement. They didn't negotiate. They didn't come back with conditions of their own. They figured it out. Friends, temporary arrangements, support from their father in ways I hadn't anticipated and didn't appreciate. I won't pretend that didn't sting. It did. Not because Paul helped, but because it worked. Because Jordan managed without me. That was the moment the panic started. Not outwardly, but internally. I've always believed stability comes from structure, from rules, from knowing who controls what. Watching my child choose instability over my terms forced me to confront something I'd never admitted before. My authority only existed as long as my money did. Once that was gone, I had nothing to leverage, no influence, no say. And I hated how powerless that made me feel. I didn't spiral publicly. I didn't call repeatedly. I didn't show up uninvited the way Jordan had. I stayed contained, but the isolation crept in quietly. Friends stopped calling. Invitations slowed, then stopped entirely. Family gatherings became awkward or non-existent. People didn't argue with me anymore. They avoided me. That was worse. For the first time, I wasn't the one enforcing distance. I was on the receiving end of it. That's when I agreed to therapy, not because I suddenly believed I was wrong, and not because I wanted reconciliation. I went because I couldn't stand the silence anymore, because the certainty I'd relied on, I'm being reasonable, everyone else is emotional, no longer felt solid. In the first session, I laid everything out the way I always have: facts, payments, expectations. I explained that I didn't abandon anyone. I explained that Jordan is an adult. I explained that boundaries matter and that money without authority is meaningless. I expected pushback. Instead, the therapist listened and then asked one question I still don't like. What did Jordan learn about love that night? I tried to redirect. I talked about adulthood, independence, consequences. She didn't argue with me. She brought it back to context. Winter, nighttime, emotional shock, lack of preparation. She didn't accuse me of malice. She talked about impact. She introduced a phrase I resisted immediately: financial coercion. I rejected it on instinct. Coercion implies force, manipulation, threat. I didn't threaten Jordan. I stated terms. I didn't enjoy sending them away. I wasn't yelling or cruel. But she pointed out something I couldn't easily dismiss. When one person controls housing, healthcare, and basic stability, choice becomes theoretical. When the consequence of disobedience is losing your safety net overnight, the power imbalance matters whether or not it was intended. That didn't sit well with me. It still doesn't, entirely. What made it worse was Jordan's refusal to engage unless the relationship existed without conditions. I reached out once, carefully, deliberately. I said I was open to talking. I said I was willing to reconsider support once respect and boundaries were established. I thought that was reasonable. Jordan didn't respond directly. Paul did. The message was short and devastating in its simplicity. Jordan would not resume contact if it involved money, conditions, or leverage of any kind. They were not interested in renegotiating terms. They were not interested in partial support. They were not interested in a relationship that required proving gratitude. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was final. That hurt more than being called cruel ever did. Because it forced me to confront something I've been avoiding. I don't actually know how to have a relationship without control. I defined parenting through provision and enforcement. Bills paid, rules followed, stability maintained. I believed that was love, or at least that it should be enough. Without that role, I feel irrelevant, unnecessary, replaceable. I won't pretend I suddenly see everything clearly or that I've absolved myself of pride. I still believe boundaries matter. I still believe adults are responsible for themselves. I still bristle at the word abandonment, but I can no longer deny the outcome, even if I argue with the interpretation. Control destroyed trust, not in one dramatic moment, but over time. That night was just the clearest expression of something that had always been there. Love with terms, support with strings, safety contingent on obedience. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I don't expect it. Jordan doesn't owe me reconciliation, or understanding, or patience. They made that clear, and I finally believed them. What I'm left with now is grief. Not just for the relationship I lost, but for the version of parenting I believed in. I believed that providing meant protecting, that authority meant care, that control meant closeness. I was wrong about at least one of those. I don't know if Jordan will ever come back. I don't know if I would recognize the relationship if they did. What I do know is that money didn't keep my child close. It kept them compliant. Until it didn't. And that's the part I have to live with. I didn't kick my child out of my house.